Welcome to the Freedom Podcast, and I'm here with G in person.
Come on, Josh, in the flesh.
How are you, Dad?
Well, we landed last night, so sort of a few hours sleep, and then Josh is obviously already going, right, come on, let's get a podcast. So I'm in the office, our Freedom offices here in Raleigh. We've got an academy going on.
Yeah.
Next to us over there, seeing a bunch of people here. I mean, I love it.
It is awesome.
I love seeing what's going on here in Raleigh. It's so exciting, Josh. And to be here in the same room together.
Come on.
It's quite, it hasn't been very often we've done this together. It's normally always an ocean apart. So, yeah, excited for this week, what we got in store.
Yeah, we're working these guys hard this week. We got loads of plans, spending time with our small group leaders, spending time with our leadership night school intake this year, spending time with obviously the academy this afternoon. So, hey, we're excited to have these guys.
Sunday.
What a privilege. Yeah, and Sunday's the main event
of the church on Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's going to be real special. And then we're doing Leadership Hub as well.
Leadership Hub as well on Monday night.
They are working as hard.
Gonna need some time off after this.
But seriously, it's an absolute privilege for us to be here, to see everything that you and Rosie have been doing. And I just love it. You can just feel the excitement and the anticipation of everything that's happening here.
Definitely. It really does feel an exciting season for us where we've just had an amazing last 18 months. And obviously we're just right at the start of this new 2025. But whenever we look at something as planters, builders, as kind of that apostolic grace and mantle is on us to build church, I think we just look at things and we just want them to grow. There's just something of this growth mindset. And that's what I wanted us to talk about today, G, is this idea that I believe every Christian, every person that follows Jesus should have a growth mindset, and how that applies to us in so many different aspects of our life, from our family to our home, to even things like our garden, it can be. But there's something about we should be outputting, growing something. And I know you're a big one as well for like growing who you are as a person, your character, where are you changing? And so we can look at that on almost a big scale of thinking about how we must be growing things as leaders and pastors. But also there's the much smaller scale, but also as important, about our daily lives, about growing. I was actually listening to something around some just contrasts around different countries around the world, and they were talking about the UK and they were talking about America. And one of the things that I love about living in the US is they have such a growth mindset. They are always thinking about growth and movement forward. And it's actually really, it's a great environment to be in, because it's something I think of a biblical principle, which is that we're meant to grow. So what are your thoughts about that as a Christian, and what we should be doing, and what's the first things that come to mind?
The first thing is right from the beginning, when I think God's word, he said to create Adam and Eve, go forth and multiply. There was just something about go and subdue the earth, go and make it this garden, the produce.
They were doing gardening.
Fruitfulness. It was like all that stuff of reaping the fruits. It was like, it's fruitfulness. Be fruitful. And at the heart of every human being is, I want to be fruitful with my life. Think about it. I think the frustration comes and the discouragement comes when we do things and we feel like we're not fruitful. But it is something in every one of us. You don't really meet many people who say, I'm not really interested in being fruitful.
Right.
So fruitfulness is something that was put in us from God. It's like, there's just something powerful about that. But it's what it costs to be fruitful. That's the challenge. Right. Where people, they want to be fruitful, but it costs to be fruitful. You have to do things, processes involved. We love the event. We love the fact of, I've got, we've been laughing about some of the plants here in the office, and said you need someone with green fingers to make them grow.
They're looking a little unhealthy. It is the winter.
You have to have a culture as well, though, that specifically, takes care that they are watered, they are taken care of. And many of us, almost with our lives, want to be able to plant a tree and get fruit off it within the next few weeks. but it doesn't work that way. It works with
that's
seasons.
really good.
And the Bible talks about the seasons and about a time for everything. So it all connects. And it's a really important principle that we realize that, God's called us to be a fruitful people. It's built into our very being, is to be fruitful and see increase. But you can't be fruitful unless you are willing to grow. And if you grow, that's all about your roots. So the reason, many people are frustrated about the lack of fruitfulness is where their roots are. Where you put your roots is what you draw from. And if you put your roots down into certain attitudes and perspectives of life, and sometimes those belief systems we have, we inherit them from our past, our background, our culture, we're wondering why there's no fruit on the tree. It's like we got leaves, but there's not really any fruit. And Jesus talks about it with the fig tree. And, quite shockingly, he comes along and he curses it because it's like, you were designed to have fruit and you haven't got any. Do you know? I mean, it's quite a powerful story in the Bible of how Jesus then curses it, because he says, you are sucking the nutrients out of the soil. You are taking the water. You are feeding off God's provision, but you are not providing. You're refusing to be fruitful. And this, I believe, is a picture of what, as human beings, we can be. We can take from God. We can draw from him. There can be this entitlement and yet not produce fruit. And that was an offense to God. And that, I think that's probably something really big in our hearts as leaders, is that we see we have a responsibility to steward well. So see all these things that are linking in is around our roots. Where are they placed? Around how we steward the resources that God puts in our hands, the giftings God puts in our hands. How do we steward them? Because if we don't steward them well and we don't produce fruit, I believe that we're accountable for that.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about leadership and raising up leaders, which is, the heart of Freedom Churches, we just want to see the next generation leaders.
That's right.
We're passionate about it because we don't want to see that locked away. We want to see it released, but that requires commitment to process, not just, we love our academy students, absolutely love them around the world who commit to that. But we don't want to see a year program. Even that can be an event for a year. It's what you do with it.
That's right.
Go out. And we have seen, haven't we, over the years, some that put it to great use and others where it just seems to be buried.
Yeah.
And it's that fruitfulness coming alive, seeing the tree produce the fruit. That's God's plan and intention for every one of us. He doesn't set us up to be barren, fruitless trees. He has put the potential in the DNA of every believer to have a life of fruitfulness.
I think about, just that whole idea of growing and being people that see things grow. If you don't, as a gardener, have a plan to grow your garden, it just grows wild. You can't. You have to have a plan of intentionality of growth. So I think as we're thinking about this now, talking about it, do you have a plan to grow your life this year? As we're talking about this, where's your intentionality? Yeah. Where are you looking at your family life? Where are you looking at your marriage and thinking, this is one step that we could take to grow in our relationship this year. This is one way that I could grow in my relationship with Jesus this year. This is one way I could grow as a leader. If you've got a business, you should be thinking about not just keeping your head above the water, think about it growing. And sometimes, and I know you went through things like this, didn't you? So many times where you almost felt like, I know with, just talk to us a moment about you were, it was almost that you lost the house that you had built because of financial difficulties, businesses that you were partnered with had gone bankrupt, and you were struggling to keep your head above water. But then God has he's not saying just survive. He comes with a word, doesn't he? Just talk about that a moment, where that word came.
So we were in this very challenging place of not knowing what the future was for us. And we had Clem Ferris, he pops up on these podcasts.
He does. We should get Clem
prophet, Uncle Clem, the prophet, came in at this point of our life where we were, church was fairly small. We were doing our best to grow it, But yeah, we'd had these huge challenges in our church, and we were struggling, in our business. And in the business, because of people going bankrupt on us, looked like we were going to face bankruptcy. So we were struggling to keep hold of the house that we had, and we didn't know what the future was. We think we're going to end up perhaps going bankrupt, perhaps ending up in social housing, etc. It was just a very difficult time, and didn't know what the future was. So I'm sort of at this evening with our church, and a few of us as leaders were being prophesied over. And I remember Uncle Clem, he comes along to me, and I'm there sort of really thinking, God, I need some encouragement. And then he starts speaking and says, you're going to build a new house, like a bigger house, because our house was fairly small. And he's like, you're going to build a bigger house, and God's going to provide. And as soon as he said it inside, I was obviously doubting. And he said, even now you doubt God's word, he said, and you're there thinking, I can't keep hold of the one I've got. And that's what I was thinking. And he speaks this word of life, and he says, you've got to get your mind off that, because God's about to do something for you, because his plan is still fruitfulness, even in the face of the drought. It's like we just didn't have anything really. He said, believe. And this is what he said. He said, you focus on building my house, God said, and I'll build yours. And I thought it really hit home to me. And it was like, right, I've got to hand this to God. We've got to make decisions and do stuff. We've got to get a plan together. And we actually ended up getting some plans of this house that was twice the size. It ended up being twice the size of the one we had.
Wow.
And through a whole series of events, God moved in a miraculous way. And we put these plans on the back of the door of our bedroom, it was, because we had to believe for it to happen. And so when you talk about a plan, this is so important. A lot of people have dreams, but they don't always have a plan.
Right.
And I think this is key for a lot of Christians. We can sometimes just have, our dream is our vision, but we've got no plan. And you have to have a plan. And the plan you need to get in front of your eyes. So if it is around your marriage, it's like, do you know what? Maybe it's become a little bit predictable. Maybe the marriage has become a bit dull. Maybe we've lost that passion that we had for one another in our relationship. Well, you can need a plan. What are the things we need to change? Right. But then you're going to need to get it down together, agree together, and then start to see change. And it doesn't just happen. Like you're so accurate with that. It's not like accidental. Oh, something just changed. In the garden, you plant things. There's a right season. There's a right culture, right temperature. You have a plan of the time and the way that things are nurtured. And we need that as well for these things in our life around our family, raising our kids. What's our vision for our kids and our family and their futures? Planning all of those things, our faith. And we saw God move for us in this situation, which was against all of the odds. Because God does have all the time, he's saying, come on, fruitfulness. But are you willing to make a plan and then get it at the forefront of your mind and say, we're determined.
Yes.
Any business, you don't accidentally have a great business. You do it through making great decisions, hard work, discipline, intentionality, commitment. And it's the same for really the things that God has within your life.
Yes. Yeah. And there is something so important about this growth mindset. And I think that's one of the things that God's trying to do in you in that moment, which is like, right, you're thinking about just making it. I'm actually going to grow what you have. Yeah. And I think that there are many people here now that maybe are listening to this that are they're not thinking about growth. They're not thinking about taking ground, moving forward, the change. Yeah. Maybe it's personally, maybe it's practical. God cares about growth in all that we have. Yeah, he does. We talk about the power of the talents, and the master comes back, and it's like he's not interested in saying, "Oh, here's what I had, I buried it, and now you got it back as you wanted it." Yeah. No, I want to know what you did with what you were given. Yeah. And even I know people will talk to you and they say, "Oh, well, we're not really sure about having another kid." What would you say any time that any person that says, "Oh, we're not sure," you will always say, have the kid, won't you? Yeah. Grow your family. Have another one.
Yeah. I've had some very interesting conversations with some of our men. So it'd be particularly with our men, whether that's from barbarians in our church, our men's ministry stuff, where we've sat around a table, 5, 6 of us, and we've, just gone through, hey, what's God saying right now? And what we've had quite often is one of those fathers, saying, hey, I know we've got 1 or we've got 2 children, but big thing right now is we don't know if we should have another child. And I say, well, why is that? Well, because of the cost, because of the world we're in, all these things. And I will generally always say, how can you not? How can you not? There is not that we're out there saying have 10 children. We're not saying that, but we have a lot of children in Freedom Church because I believe in fruitfulness. And what I turned around and said to this particular guy, who great character, great guy, following God with his family, I said, if you have got 2 children, right, you've got 2 boys right now, and the way you're raising them, I tell you what, God's given you something very special. And the greatest gift you have are the children God's put in your hand. You steward them up to be men of God, women of God, yeah? And I said, how could you not? God's looking for people who will be fruitful with that. And if there's an opportunity to actually have another one, I would always say, you need to do it, because our world needs those world changers, needs those people young men of faith, in reference to this guy. It's like the world needs it. And we are faced with so much, opposition in this world. If you have the opportunity to say, do you know what? I don't know how we're going to afford it. We obviously have got 5 boys, and we never once looked at what it cost.
Yeah,
we never. And we were in some difficult places. Perhaps you didn't always. Perhaps they were hand-me-downs, and it wasn't always the easiest. But we believed in a greater thing, which was God's call for fruitfulness. If we could, how could I don't know, go through life and then get to the end, and God said, why did you only have X number? And this is no criticism to people with 2 children.
Yeah,
I think this is, I know every person's situation is different, but there is something I want to, if you are thinking about it, if you are thinking, what are the factors that are holding us back from having another child together? If you're a Christian couple and you're raising great kids already, it's like, hey, our world needs that, and there is a call over that. And we certainly are so grateful that God entrusted us with 5 boys.
Absolutely, and I think it really comes down to, what's the question that would hold you back? Oh yeah, we'd love another one, but it's about money. Well, who's the provider anyway? God's our provider. It's not you. And sometimes I think even then we get lost in that idea of thinking it's all about us having to provide the cash. Everything we have is from God anyway. So he'll take care of them. He'll take care of us. Yeah. So it's really, what's the driving motivator behind that? If it's that thinking, it's the wrong thinking. If it's, hey, the family's done and we feel that's it, well, that's different.
Yeah, because it's different for every person about, how many children. You should have that as a God thing as well. But that's what we're talking about, is what's the reason behind it? Well, we can give a better life to 2 than 3. It's like, really? Is that because you can buy them the things they need? And I think that is never a sign of a great sort of quality family. I think there's so much more around it. Also, I think about when God entrusts us with children, the greatest gift that he's given us. You are raising, I use this term, world changers, because, that's what we believed for each of our boys, that when we're entrusted, we're going to raise them up with that mindset. And they're going to go out and they're going to find their wife, and they're going to have their own children raised up. That it's a legacy. It's a powerful legacy. They're going to go out, and I'm sat here with you, Josh, and, we're in North Carolina, USA, and you're building church here with hundreds of people, thousands that have been impacted. And it's like, I don't know, maybe me and Mum at a certain point might have just thought, do you know what? I think we'd like, we'd like something smaller, and we want to think smaller, and we want a more comfortable life and more money to spend on ourselves. how can I compare that to what we're witnessing right now? When we look at you and you with your children, you with your church, and what is happening here is like, God, I am so grateful that he spoke to us and just said, I'm going to give you the gift of children. And we didn't put almost like a limit on that. We just said, God, it's our greatest honor, and he has equipped us and blessed us to do that. So it's how big you see it. It's not just you thinking, what can we do in our smallness? God is a God that thinks big, and I believe he's looking for parents that will say, do you know what, God, we're going to trust you. It might be challenging, but we're going to trust you. And with it, you've put in our hands to raise up these world changers, because it's the way that God works.
Absolutely right. And I love this idea that what we've been given, we've got to take it and grow it. I was listening to this thing about there's thousands of millionaires. It's over 10,000, I think, in the last year or something, that have left the UK because there's this almost difference in the way that business is treated there, or things like, because there's not always that cultivating a growth mindset. So they want to go and invest in other places, live other places where that is an attractive, almost quality. And I think about how we as people, we need to be thinking in that way, where we see that this is where we need to sow. This is where we need to come and pour ourselves in. That's what I look for in people that I lead, is that who wants to grow, who wants to expand their lives, who's got vision, because there's something about, that's where you want to invest, because you see the multiplication.
And that's what the talents is about, which people find it very hard, I think, when they think of Jesus telling this truth, when even the guy who doubles his talents, he's got 2, now he's got 4. It's like, there's this whole thing, we'll give the one from the guy who just kept it and did nothing, give it to the one who isn't doing as well. No, he takes it and gives it to the most fruitful person.
Wow. Yeah.
The other guy's fruitful, but he invests in the most fruitful. So the one with 5, he's like, he can have that one. Whereas most of us, in our Christianese way, would sort of say, hey, let's help out the one that has done well, but let's give him a little bit more. No, where is the biggest fruitfulness? And then God is saying, that's where I'm going to put it. And that blows some of our theology, because we're trying to weigh up the whole thing. God, the mercy giver, all these things. But also he's a God that where you invest, God will add more. So when you're fruitful with little, he will give more. And it's not a case of let's do a fair share around here. He's actually looking, as you said rightly, that as you're looking to raise leaders, as you're looking to invest in people, you're looking for that willingness, that approach of saying, I'm going to do what I need to change and grow. And you're going to have more time and you're going to invest more into that, because it's like you did something with it.
Yeah.
But for someone who, I'll do a bit with it, are you going to come back and go, I'll invest more because you did a little bit?
Yeah.
No, you'll invest with who gives the most. And that's, I think, is just such a great principle I'm aware of as we make decisions about what we do in leadership, of what God puts in our hands, is that we ensure that we have a great plan. We create capacity for growth, because that's another one, is creating the space for growth. So when you talk about a plan, a business person doesn't sort of start off with his 3 employees and then he's got a plan to go to 10 without creating, I need more vehicles, I need more of a system.
Right.
You don't wait to get 10 and then think I need a system.
Yeah.
But sometimes with the church, we're not planning to have greater capacity before the capacity comes, and then we're waiting for the capacity. It's something about making space. And so you make space. If you want to go from gardening into an orchard,
right,
you're going to start planting more trees. You've got to create the space. And that in our lives, whether it is marriage, whether it's family, our spiritual lives, our churches, our leadership, you've got to create the space for the fruitfulness to happen. God will move within that, but you don't wait until, now we can't cope. No business really operates like that. They have a plan, as you said. What's our, year plan, our 3-year plan, 5-year plan? Because you're creating the space for the growth to come. So I think that's a great question for some people as well. What space are you creating for that growth? It doesn't happen accidentally, because otherwise you can get stuck in a pot, and all the roots, they don't go further, and it ends up being restricted.
Wow.
And you've got to get out from that, being pot bound, it's called. And you got to think, no, we've got to get planted, in a bigger space, because where you put those, that pot will always restrict your greater growth.
But I think, one of the reasons that we're here, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, that we're sat here in this place right now, we're recording this in Raleigh, North Carolina, is because you as a pastor, as a leader, you've always had this heart to grow what you've got in front of you, whether you're in a living room and you're trying to grow a small group, whether you're trying to grow the church. I've never known you to be like, okay, well, let's just take it a little bit easier, or, hey, we're doing quite well. There's always this urgency in you for growth. But I think about some of your peers, or maybe people that you've done life with alongside for years. You've seen a lot of other leaders come and go, and that is not always a mindset of every leader. So what is it that has it? Because I think everyone starts something from a desire to grow something, but they don't always keep it. I think you've endured for decades, and you've able to held on to this idea of, I've got to grow it. I've got to grow it. What keeps that fire burning, and what do you think stopped maybe other people that you have seen from continuing to have a growth mindset?
Yeah, so 2 things come to mind. The first one is, in building church particularly, whether that's in a small group, a home, church gets bigger, it's like, okay, there's more. It's really out of the command that we were called to take this gospel, to go into the nations.
Right.
I take it literal.
Yeah.
When I see people settle, we could have easily settled as one church in a very comfortable place all those years ago, and in a way been successful in our small world. People like, hey, you're doing so great, and it all looked provided for. And I just knew that God has called us for more. And it was hard for me to think about the nations back then, because we were in a small town, but I did think about the city down the road. I did think about someone I met from Belgium who needed help to plant church. And I think it was always opportunity. So there's almost like an opportunism of sort of God coming along, and God gives us these opportunities, and he says, will you help? Well, I haven't got much to help with. Yeah, but will you help? And that's what we chose to do from the early stages when we went to Africa. Yeah. I was asked to go and speak at a leaders thing. Very first time I went there, Lake Victoria, and it was a crazy experience. But through it, God opened up just by our yes, saying, well, I'll take what I've got. And I do want to encourage people with that. A lot of it is actually just being fruitful with what is in your hands right now. You might be a small group leader. You might be serving in some way in one of our churches. Be fruitful with what's in your hands. And when you get an opportunity, I would say always go, always say yes.
Yeah.
And see what God will do, because that's what happened. Because there is this urgency for me within, I think, that drives me in H, which is the gospel has got to keep going. The gospel has this sending power. It keeps sending you. It's never to settle. It's always in transit. So I almost have this sense that it's not going to stop. It's like there's this momentum. There is this movement that is all the time. It's in my soul. So it should stop you from settling. I know the enemy is to settle. The enemy is to sit down and go, oh, haven't we done enough now? Well, we've done more than a lot of people. And it's like, that is bad language. That's like, you're in trouble once you start thinking that way. So that's one of the big things is the gospel sends us. Just the second thing quickly is, I know that I'm going to answer one day for the potential that God placed within me. And so I don't want to get to the end and get to be before the Lord in heaven, and he speaks to me and just says, why didn't you do something with what, I put in your hands at that particular point? Why did you get to this age, 40 years old, and you just settled down and thought, we've done enough. Now I'm going to focus on some of my own things. I know I'm going to answer for that potential. And I think that also is something that disturbs me. In one way, it haunts me.
Yeah.
Not in a negative way, but it haunts me in the sense that I don't want to get through because I know we're talking about eternity. So the things we're doing here on earth, it says it's like a vapor. It's very quick and over. I got to make sure within me that I am here to fulfill the potential of God's call, and that's to be fruitful. So I need to use whatever is in my hands, and that is also a driver. It's a driver. So the kingdom's a driver, and the other driver is the potential God has put in me that I've got to fulfill it. I don't want to die with it. So those are the things that I would see. If I add this as well, Josh, is I'm sure there's people listening who would feel a little bit stuck.
Right.
And we're talking about fruitfulness. And it's like, and you're committed and you're faithful and you turn up. Faithful, you can be faithful. And I've met many Christians who have been faithful. They turn up, they even serve every week. They've done it for years. People have been in church for 40 years and they are real faithful people. Faithful is not the same as fruitful. It's great just saying, hey, I was faithful. When you get before God, I was faithful. The servant, who had the one talent was faithful, because he kept it. He didn't lose it, but he wasn't fruitful. And I think we get really mixed up about what it means to be, I'm faithful. I can live in a way my own life and still be faithful and do my own things, but not answer the potential within me. Well, that's not being fruitful. And I believe that God is not only looking for faithful people, but fruitful. It's like two parts of the coin. It's not just a one-faced coin. It's two parts. And God is saying, where is that fruitfulness? Even looking back at this past year, 2024, I think you've got to be bold enough to say, where's the fruitfulness?
Yeah.
Because how are you going to decide what you should change unless you look at what's wrong or what you didn't accomplish?
Yeah.
What do I keep doing but I'm not seeing the fruitfulness? I've got to plant in a different way. I've got to water in a different way. I've got to get out of the pot. I've got to change. And I see so many great people, and I'm praying that God would speak to you through this podcast even now, because I think you're in danger of really going on this next year and just repeating some things, and you'll get through and think, did I feel fruitful? Didn't see a lot of fruit, but it comes with change, the commitment to change through the process of change, which means doing things different. And you've got to identify them, got to create space to see the greater fruitfulness that God has for your life. He has it for you. He is cheering you on. The Holy Spirit is wanting to challenge you and convict you with it, but you're the one that needs to make the plan to see the fruitfulness of God in your life.
Absolutely. We've got to grow what we've been given.
Yeah.
And, I spoke about this a few weeks ago, but in Raleigh on our Sunday service, but it's that a seed cannot be fruitful until it is planted. So you've got to plant it. And I think there are even some people that are watching this and maybe you've had a good job and it's earning you a good wage. And it's like you'd almost be fine staying where you are, but there's this thing of business in you to grow something, to plant seeds and see something multiply. But there's almost this resistance to go and do it. And I think that there are so many more business owners that need to come into the kingdom of God, as in business innovators, entrepreneurs, starters.
Agree. Yeah.
Because Christians make amazing business people, but I don't think there are enough of them.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage you, if you've had ideas, I want to encourage you, maybe this is the year to start taking a step saying, grow yourself, take a step of faith. Starting investing in something, take some risks that are in line with God and wise, and seek counsel, but do it and step out and grow.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, hey, you could do another great year in your job and that I'm sure would be fine. But actually multiply what you've been given.
Yeah.
I just want to share this from Luke 13. As we've been talking, this parable came to mind that Jesus tells. And he says, there was once a man who had a fig tree growing in his vineyard. He went looking for the figs on it, but he found none. So he said to his gardener, look, for 3 years, I've been coming here looking for figs on this fig tree, and I haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it go on using up the soil? But the gardener answered, leave it alone. Sir, just 1 more year. I'll dig around it and I'll put in some manure. Then, if the tree bears figs next year, so much the better. If not, then you can have it cut down. Wow. And I just want to say, there's a bunch of stuff in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
But the first thing that comes to mind is there's an accountability, isn't there? That actually there is an expectation on us to be fruitful. The gardener, the owner comes back and says, this is the purpose. This is what is meant to be happening, just as you shared about Jesus earlier. This is what this is made for. Be fruitful. There's an expectation. We'll be held account for how fruitful or how much we grew in our lives. But then, second of all, if you feel condemned or guilty, or I haven't done this, there's another chance. Yeah. And I love at the end, the gardener steps in and is like, hey, let's almost give a little bit more care and attention. And there's a plan.
Yep.
Hey, if we actually put the manure and we actually put the fertilizer down, maybe it's going to help its growth. And there's a plan in place to see the growth come, to see the growth break through. So maybe you've looked year on year and you think, I can't actually see, how did I grow last year? How did I really change? But if that's the case, get your plan now and then look in a year's time. Start implementing something.
Yeah, I love this picture of digging. Dig around if I dig around the tree, when you dig like this, what you're doing is you're breaking the hard ground. I think the hard ground is not just, it's classically a hard heart, but a hard heart can be one that doesn't want to change. If you think about it, is you cannot see fruitfulness through hardened ground or hardened heart. And it reminds us again, if somehow cynicism has come in, perhaps there is a response to this, what you're hearing today, and it's a bit reactive. Well, you imagine the Holy Spirit wants to put that, the dig in the ground that's hard around your life. Are you willing to allow it? Are you willing to allow? Because what happens then, it creates change. Because when you change the soil, you put the manure, you're breaking the old and you're bringing in the new nutrients and the new to enable growth. How receptive are you? How receptive are you to allow God to bring the change? But you've got to break the ground. You can't stay the same.
Yeah.
And that's the thing of really surrender and yielding and saying, God, there is a call for me to be fruitful, more fruitful. And that's what God is, speaking through that scripture.
Come on. It's great. Hey, I'm sure as you listen to this, there are some things to chew on. Hey, maybe there's going to be some children born off the back of this podcast, or maybe there'll be some business started or some churches planted or something.
Yeah,
but there is a growth mindset that we, as the people of God, we need to have it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got it, go wrestle for it. Go after it. Get inspired. Come on. Hey, we'll see you again soon for the next podcast.